Psychology for the People. I'm your host, Allison Kaufman, and today I thought we'd talk about the history of metal. Metal has gone through a lot of development since its beginnings in the 1960s. In fact, many people who were fans of the original metal are definitely not fans of it anymore. However, it has made many new fans along the way, so let's get started, shall we? Who the first metal band really is a matter of some debate. Americans tend to call Led Zeppelin the first metal band, while British people tend to give that honor to Black Sabbath. Both bands, however, tend to receive equal credit with the formation of early metal. Metal originally was a genre that mixed psychedelic rock with blues. In fact, one of the earliest recordings of a metal song was the Blue Cheer cover of Summertime Blues. One of the next examples was, of course, Steppenwolf's first album, Steppenwolf. Other bands began to follow suit with a heavier sound, including the Beatles with Helter Skelter, which was definitely one of the heaviest songs recorded by a popular band at the time. Pink Floyd followed suit with the release of Ibiza and the Nile Song, which were both very heavy and very loud. Zeppelin, of course, formed in 1969 and released their first two albums that year, and they popularized a very distorted guitar sound as well as Plant's distinctive wailing and emotive vocals. Black Sabbath's main contribution to the genre was its reliance on power chords, which is actually a really interesting story. Their guitarist, Tony Iommi, worked for a while in an industrial factory, and on his last day of work, he suffered a very bad work accident in which the tips of his middle and ring finger of his right hand were cut off. For a while, he almost entirely gave up on playing the guitar, but then he learned about this guitarist named Django Reinhardt, a jazz guitarist who was a very, very talented musician, and he found out that Django only played with two fingers because he also suffered from an accident, but his was from a fire. Tony was inspired to continue playing guitar, and he began to futz around with the instrument, trying to figure out how he could continue playing. He ended up figuring out that he could extend the length of those cut-off fingers by putting thimbles on top of them. The problem with this is that he couldn't feel the strings himself when he was playing with thimbles, so he would end up playing too hard, or he also found out he wasn't really able to bend the strings very well. But he figured out that if he played at a lowered tuning, the strings were slackened enough that he could bend them even with the thimbles. He also introduced to the world the power of the power chord. Sabbath and Zeppelin inspired many other early metal bands to form, including Blood Oyster Cult, Aerosmith, and of course, glam rock Kiss. The band Grand Funk Railroad, which was the most commercially successful heavy metal band in America between their formation in 1970 and their breakup in 1976, introduced to metal the idea of continuous touring. With Grand Funk Railroad's success, most other metal bands began to tour as well, which meant that it created a kind of grassroots fan base for metal. Judas Priest, which released their first album in 1974, was the definitive post-Sabbath metal group. They abandoned that bluesy sound that was present in early metal sounds and instead focused on really rapid tempos, a twin guitar attack sound, and a very clean metallic sound to their strings. And they also kind of bridged this divide between early metal and punk metal. Other bands to bridge this gap included Motorhead, Iron Maiden, Leppard, and Saxon, all members of the new wave of the British heavy metal. The US also had their new wave with bands like Van Halen, Quiet Riot, Rat, and Motley Crue. Moving into the 80s, you got bands like Poison, Warrant, and Cinderella. However, many of these new bands were getting too much into the glam rock phase, which left a lot of fans looking for something more deep and dangerous. Enter Guns N' Roses and Jane's Addiction. Both bands came from the hard rock club scene in LA and were known for being far more raw and dangerous than their glamorous contemporaries. At the same time, another type of metal was emerging: thrash metal. Thrash metal was led by the big four of thrash, or Anthrax, Metallica, Slayer, and Megadeth. The movement began in the Bay Area of California, but it soon spread throughout the world. 3 German thrash bands were responsible pretty much for spreading it all over Europe, and they were Creator, Sodom, and Destruction. From thrash metal came death metal, and black metal, and power metal, and doom metal, and groove metal, and even alternative metal, which is fun mix between thrash metal and grunge rock. As you can see by the names of all these subgenres, it was very important to be epic and dark if you were going to be a metal band of the 80s and 90s. Today, of course, you can find metal in any kind of flavor. I like some of it, but I have to say I prefer the original strains of heavy metal than the new screaming stuff, which I know it's not supposed to be singing, but as a singer, it just hurts my voice to listen to people screaming like that. How about you? Let me know in the comments below or on Twitter. I love hearing from you guys. If you learned something new, awesome. Be sure to like and subscribe. Also, in my research, I found this amazing timeline of metal, which I will be linking in the description. Be sure to check it out because it includes when bands formed, when they released albums, and even when bands broke up. Until next week, guys, rock on. Musicology.